Welcome back to Power in Politics, as we are now joined by Jeremy Gruber, who is Senior Vice President at Open Primaries, which is an organization that advocates for exactly what is in the name. So Jeremy, thanks so much for being here, especially during a time where primary is all the talk across the city.
No, thank you for having me. It's really an exciting time.
Absolutely. And so to be clear, Open Primaries is not the system that's currently in place here in New York City.
No, New York is one of the few cities that has a closed partisan primary, which means that Democrats can vote in the Democratic primary, Republicans can vote in the Republican primary, and if you're not registered with either party, you are shut out of voting in the primary election. That's not the case in most cities. 85% of cities use an open form of primary that allow everybody to vote.
So let's expand on that. What is an open primary? How is it different from the system that's currently in place here in the city?
Sure, there's a lot of different forms of open primaries. At their very basic, what an open primary means is that independent voters, which are now the largest and fastest growing group of voters in our country, and the fastest growing group of voters in our city, can participate in the first round of elections. So that's the most basic form. Continues a party primary, but independents can participate by picking one ballot of one party or the other to vote. And then there's a nonpartisan open primary that is used in a handful of states, and like I said, 85% of cities use that nonpartisan open primary, where you have one ballot, all the candidates are on that ballot, and the top two vote getters move on to the general election.
So what are some of the advantages of having an open primary system in place? And can you point to any examples where it is the law of the land to exemplify the successes of it?
Well, open primaries are in 85% of cities. Mm-hmm. In fact, Washington, D.C. just passed what's called a semi-open primary in November, which means independents can pick a ballot now moving forward in Washington, D.C. Most cities like Los Angeles, Chicago use a nonpartisan open primary. All candidates on the ballot, everybody votes. Top vote getters move on to the general election. It's really a very simple system.
What are you attributing this wave of large cities across the country and other areas as well adopting open primaries to, especially as of late?
There's really two major changes in the American electorate and American elections that are fueling open primaries. The first is the massive growth of independent voters. Mm-hmm. Independents are now the largest and fastest growing group of voters in the country. There's over 1 million voters in New York City alone. Mm-hmm. That is having immense pressure on a political system and an election system that was really not designed with them in mind. The second thing that is happening is the complete precipitous drop of competitiveness in our general elections. So let me give you a few examples of what that looks like right here in New York City. Let's look at the mayoral races. We know that our last two mayors have not been particularly popular, yet they're winning the general election with almost 3/4 of the vote. But they're coming out of a very competitive primary. We're looking now at this upcoming mayoral primary in New York City. 9 candidates on the ballot for mayor. The primary in a couple weeks is going to be very competitive. But the general election, well, the general election much less so, because likely whoever wins the Democratic primary is going to sail through to the general election. And we're seeing that around the country, where half our races statewide see candidates running unopposed. Less than 10% are competitive. Mm-hmm. The primary elections in this country and in this city are really where the most meaningful votes happen.
Yeah, often we say that the general is decided during the primary here in New York City.
That's exactly right.
Speaking of the city's Charter Revision Commission is now taking on primary reform as an issue that they'll likely be considering throughout the summer and could make its way onto the November ballot for voters to decide on. What are the two options, I believe, that they're currently considering when it comes to open primaries here in New York, and how would each look like for voters should it ultimately be passed?
Sure, and it's all credit to the Charter Revision Commission for taking this issue really seriously, because dozens of independent voters have been coming out to every hearing around the 5 boroughs, and the commissioners have been listening, paying attention, and responding, and that's a really exciting development, because this is a real voting crisis in this city. They're looking really at 2 different models of open primary. The one, at its most simple, called a semi-open primary, simply allows independent voters to pick a party ballot, but keeps the party primary system essentially the way it currently operates. The other is called a top two or nonpartisan primary. That's actually the system that's used in most cities, where all candidates are on one ballot and all voters vote, and the top candidates move on to the general election. Los Angeles, Detroit, Chicago, most major cities use that system. And what's most important for people to understand is primary elections are not private party affairs. These are public, taxpayer-funded elections. And yet, independent voters, the second largest group of voters in the city, cannot vote in them.
When we look at the current mayoral election that we are approaching, we have a registered Democrat as a mayor who is now running as an independent, which means that he will not appear on the June ballot, but will likely, if he hits certain benchmarks, make it to November's. Under an open primary system, would that change in any way? Would it have any impacts to how candidates can run?
Oh, likely would, and it really depends on which form of open primary that the Charter Revision Commission decides to put on the ballot. But what's most important is that when every voter gets to vote in an open primary, you have politicians that are more accountable and more responsive to the voters because they're more representative, because all the voters are choosing them. See, when you have a closed partisan primary, you have fewer and fewer voters who are choosing our elected officials. And then you have elected officials who know that in order to continue to get elected and stay in office, they have to be responsive to those small groups of partisan voters. We need to open the system up. Everybody votes, and our politicians are accountable to every New York City voter.
Jeremy Gruber, thank you so much for going over this topic with
My
us
pleasure.
and really breaking it down. We hope to talk with you again as it continues to make its way through the Revision Commission, and we'll see if it's on the ballot come November. Thanks so much.
Look forward to it. Thank you.